Hello, everybody, and welcome to the fifth episode of Tate's Takes. Very exciting Sunday we have for you all. 3 weeks in, we got the fourth week of the NFL starting very soon. A lot of good games, a lot of big games this week, and already have one going on. I got it on in the background, so if I get distracted, I apologize, but we already have the Jaguars in Atlanta playing in London today, which I think is really, really cool. But Alex, we are going to start somewhere else today outside of the NFL. We have talked a lot of NFL the last few weeks for obvious reasons, but we had huge news in the NBA. Damian Lillard, one of the most underrated players, in my opinion, coming off one of his, if not his best statistical season in Portland, even though they missed the playoffs, got traded to Milwaukee Bucks to be paired with Giannis Antetokounmpo, who is at worst, probably the second best player in the NBA today. So, who do you think the biggest winner in that trade was?
Well, I I like to think, and not to spoil old Tate's take here in
You're not
a
going to?
second.
Fine.
I like to think that the Suns, just from that three team kind of blockbuster trade, I think that they came away with a lot of really good young pieces that are serviceable coming off the bench. Not like you're not getting people that are, going to compete with Booker and
Right.
Durant at that point, but they're people that can come in, put up some points, be pretty consistent. But I think that it's really hard to say that, the Bucks are the automatic winner, just because we still have to see how the chemistry is going to work with Lillard. We're still going to hope that he can still produce as well as his last season, because the Bucks are really going to need it. The
Right.
the Eastern Conference is stacked up with great teams, good young teams too. Well, I'm thinking Knicks. I'm
Right.
thinking, the 76ers.
Cleveland has some promise.
Yeah. So you really hope that this trade works out, and you hope that, Lillard, who spent, I think it was 11 years with or with Portland,
Long time.
a long time,
Right.
and
Long time.
kind of in this, no man's land of every once in a while they get into the playoffs and make a little bit of a run, but they're just so outmatched in the West. The West is where teams either go to compete now or go to lose, essentially. Like you're not really breaking out from under Golden State, Lakers, Nuggets, all of these teams. So it's nice for him to kind of get out of that and go to where he can be a superstar now, which is it's important that he keeps up with the youth that are now coming up in the Eastern. So we'd have to see that, but I think the Suns really uh took it took a lot of very nice pieces in, and now it's just going to be figuring out how they get the most out of each one of those players and help use those players to help the longevity of the team, especially with, injuries. Kevin Durant is a little starting to get a little bit more fatigue on him. We're starting to see a little bit more game management, like season management, load management happen with
Absolutely.
that team.
Yeah.
So I think that having these guys around will really help them go a little bit further. But who do you think the winner was?
Okay. Before I get to mine, I do want to touch on something you said, which is the Suns, I think, is a good pick because they didn't really their part of this trade wasn't as sexy as getting Damian Lillard, right? But they already had their big move and got Bradley Beal. So what they really, really needed was depth and some rotational guys, because I think that's what plagued them in the series against Denver last year. So I think the Suns made out really well. I think they got some pieces that can help them. And I think they got some of what they need. They still need some backcourt and front court depth probably, but I think we have another move coming from the Suns at some point this season. But they are starting to build a heck of a team, and one that if these rotational guys can come in and be key contributors, because they're not going to have to do a ton. You have Beal, Booker, and Kevin Durant who are going to get 75% of the shots a lot of the time, between those three guys. So they need depth. They need guys who can come in and give them a spark. They need guys who can defend and who can take some of the pressure off Kevin Durant, who is, like you said, getting up there in age. I think he's 35 this season, which is, he doesn't play like he's 35, but he's at some point going to show some signs of age. I think we've already seen that with the injuries and with the amount of games played, not necessarily on the court, but if I was the Suns, my goal for Kevin Durant in the regular season would be to play about 50 or 60 games. I wouldn't even try to get him to play all 82. It's like, make sure he's healthy for the postseason, make sure he's refreshed. And that's why you have guys like Devin Booker and Bradley Beal, who on a Tuesday in November, when Kevin Durant needs to take the second night of a back-to-back off, those guys can put up the shots and run the offense. And they're young. And Booker is a heck of a player, one of my favorite players to watch in the league. So I think that's a good answer. My answer, however, and I'm going to not try to outthink the room, is Damian Lillard. Damian Lillard, that's the obvious one. That's just the low-hanging fruit. But to me, I think it's very clearly Damian Lillard. And I know he wanted to go to Miami where he could still be the best player on a team and thread the needle while still competing for a championship and having a realistic shot. And I understand that. And it's a little bit like, we're from, me and Alex, both Thunder fans. When James Harden left the Thunder, a lot of people gave him criticism for it. And I understood the appeal of wanting to go be the best player on a team. With Damian Lillard wanting to go to Miami, I understand the appeal. However, I think he is going to like his life in Milwaukee. First of all, the pressure is going to be significantly more on Giannis and the Bucks organization as a whole to win the championship. Where if Damian Lillard comes in and they end up not winning it, say they lose in the finals to Jokic, that takes a lot more of a hit on Giannis and the Bucks, who are trying to keep Giannis and now Damian Lillard, than it does on Damian Lillard in general, right? Where I think his legacy, because he's not someone that's been in the championship conversation throughout his career, he gets to kind of almost be the Klay Thompson, which is pretty stress-free. And if they win it on the other side, he will get so much credit, which is one of the reasons I think this is a great move for him, because while the clock is ticking on him being 33, we don't typically see small guards be great late into their career. You can look at Chris Paul. Once things started to decline for him, he clearly was not the same guy after a certain point, and it happens pretty quick. Steph has not quite hit that decline yet, although, I'm not even going to say that. We'll have to see how long Steph can keep going. He's pretty unbelievable. But Damian Lillard has 2 or 3 prime years left, where we'd still call it the latter end of his prime. So the clock is ticking, and how we view players that win a ring versus that don't win a ring. Like Jason Kidd is a great example, where Jason Kidd had an awesome career, went to the finals as a net, was an all-star most of the time, was really, really highly regarded as one of the best players in the NBA for a long time, even winning the championship with the Mavs when he was well past his prime, completely changed how we viewed a guy like Jason Kidd. And Damian Lillard, the jump his legacy would take and kind of the tier of player we view him as would drastically increase if he wins a championship, even as the second best guy, because I think he would be, well, obviously, he would be a key contributor and really have to be hugely important and play really well if they are going to win the championship, right? And the other reason that I think Damian Lillard should be really excited, and Alex, you talked about this a little bit, where we'll have to see what it looks like on the court, because in recent memory, we have seen super teams get together that never worked out. The Nets come to mind. If we're going back a little further, Kobe and Dwight Howard never worked out. We've seen it before where we have these superstars kind of come together and it ends up not looking the way that we think it's going to. However, on paper, this is just a match made in heaven to me because both of these two guys cover the other one's deficiency perfect. Giannis's biggest weakness is shooting the basketball and spacing the floor. Well, Damian Lillard is maybe the second or third best shooter in the league. And the other thing about Damian Lillard is he stretches the floor as far as a shooting deep three kind of shot, right? Like from 40 feet. He shoots that as well as anybody in the league and almost shoots it more effortlessly than Steph Curry. So when you have Giannis on the inside, you almost can't single cover in the paint. And then you have someone who can shoot the ball from 40 feet and space the floor and put that kind of pressure on a defense as much as anybody else in the whole league outside of maybe Steph, but maybe not as far as what the defense has to guard. I think it's just going to be a nightmare for defenses to try to defend. And then on the other side of the court, you have a perennial defense player of the year candidate in Giannis, who I think at times, I know at times is the best defensive player in the league. I've been arguing for a couple of years that he's just flatly the best defensive player in the league, even though we don't see it all the time. But I think Giannis should be able to exert more energy on that side of the ball while Damian Lillard carries more of the offense. I think Giannis can make up for whatever struggles Damian Lillard has on the defensive side of the ball. I think between him and Brook Lopez and Chris Middleton, who's a plus defender, I think they should be awesome on defense. I think Damian Lillard should be in a situation where he tries to score 30, 32 points a game. Giannis maybe drops down more to 26, 25 points a game, but then gives you a couple blocks, 13 rebounds, gets a steal a game, and really tries to increase maybe his facilitating on the offensive side. So on paper, I think these two guys fit together as well as any superstar tandem that we have seen in the past few years. And Damian Lillard, I think, just like I said, fits so well with Giannis. I do think the superstar that fits the best with Giannis, because he fits the best with any other superstar, is Kevin Durant to me, because just how effortlessly he can score the ball without dribbling, and he can get his own off the dribble and run the offense. But Damian Lillard would probably be my second choice to pair with Giannis behind Kevin Durant. And Steph is in a little bit different category, but that's not exactly realistic to get Steph to come to Milwaukee. So if I was going to pick a superstar to play with Giannis, I think it would be Dame. So that is my biggest winner, is Damian Lillard. And I think he should be incredibly excited for this coming season.
Oh yeah, I would second all of your takes. I think we see a little bit of the Giannis facilitation, the revival of the drive and kick,
That's
especially whenever you've got a guy who, like you said, put it up from any point on the floor, basically out to 40 feet, and like even his 50-50 balls are more like 80-20,
right.
70-30. Like
one of the best shooters in the league by far.
oh
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
So if there's a winner, Tate, then there has to be a loser, right? Like there
Okay,
has to be. Who's your
absolutely.
loser?
Okay, sneaky winner I'm going to throw in here is Nikola Jokic. I think is the sneaky winner of this deal, because if they can win the championship after Giannis gets Lillard, he is clearly the best player in the world. 90% of people probably already think that, but there won't even be an argument for anybody else. And his historical legacy would jump to the point where he's knocking on the door of the Shaq and Steph tier. It would be ahead of Giannis, would be ahead of Durant, would be probably at the top of the Moses, Dr. J, that kind of tier level. That's about 13 to 18 all time. Jokic would skyrocket to the top of that and really would boost his historical legacy, which is something that I care a lot about because I'm a little bit of a basketball nerd. Anyway, the loser is obviously, and again, I'm not going to outthink the room here, it has to be Miami. Miami was operating with the assumption that they were going to get Damian Lillard, and there were reports coming out of Miami the morning of the trade that they believed 90 to 95% chance they were getting Damian Lillard. And they also, there's just no way that they didn't think Milwaukee was going to be the team to get him either. Because it's not only that they did not get Damian Lillard, which for obvious reasons would have helped. I think it would have been exactly what the doctor ordered. But now you have to go against your biggest competition in the East with Damian Lillard. And if you looked at that series last year when Miami actually beat Milwaukee, Giannis was a little banged up. But more importantly, they totally melted down at the end of those games, that being Milwaukee. And they didn't have a closer. They didn't have an offense. Everyone looked scared at the end of those games when Jimmy Butler is kind of shooting laser beams out of his eyes. And Damian Lillard is the guy who will close those games, who is absolutely not afraid of a big moment, who wants the ball in his hands when the pressure's on. And Milwaukee didn't have that before. And I thought that was Miami's biggest advantage on Milwaukee. So now not only do you not have someone who would have significantly helped your team, but Milwaukee gets exactly what the doctor ordered. So I think that's just a total gut punch if you're Miami, where like, say Toronto had got Damian Lillard, or even Philly. You think Miami feels near as bad today if one of those, if anybody else in the league got Damian Lillard, it's the worst case scenario if you're Miami. And if you're Miami at some point, I think the answer to this question is yes. But you have to start wondering, are you even the second best team in the East so far? Because I tell you who doesn't think that is the Vegas odds makers, where they have them several Eastern Conference teams ahead in the standing, as far as the odds to go to the finals. So I think it's just a total gut punch for Miami. They may be looking urgently to try to make some moves, trading Tyler Hero. I don't really know who else would be on the market right now. But, later in the season, you could try to trade for Drew Holiday, who might be a good fit out there, where you just think, okay, we're going to go defense side of the ball heavy, and hopefully Jimmy Butler can have another one of those moments. So, yeah, I think clearly and obviously the biggest loser is Miami.
I tend to agree. And so, a little behind the scenes, Tate and I were talking before the podcast actually started. And I said, well, Portland looks like a pretty big loser because they don't have that much outside of Damian Lillard. And Tate made a good point. Is like, they have a plan.
Right.
And I think that I'm going to amend what I said to Tate before and say the biggest losers, and I'm saying biggest losers because it's at this point a fact that the teams in the Eastern Conference that aren't young and don't seem like they have a plan are screwed. So any teams that are relying on some of their big names, established players to really drag their team through, the postseason are just screwed at this point.
Right.
So,
well, yeah, to that point, like if you're Boston, your big offseason move was Kristaps Porzingis. It's like, oh, that's cute. The Bucks got Damian Lillard. Like that's not you're really not feeling good if you're a Boston fan today. You traded Marcus Smart, got Porzingis, who's he's all right. He's fine. He's a pretty good player, but he's not Damian Lillard. And if you're Philly, you still have the Harden headache to deal with, and Damian Lillard would have been the number one target in a Harden trade. Maybe it would have maybe had to be a 3-team trade, but that's what the Bucks were able to do anyway, is work a third team in there. And so both of those teams, yeah, the Eastern Conference as a whole, you could clump just the contenders of the Eastern Conference. Hugely disappointing week for anybody not Milwaukee in the Eastern Conference. Yeah. And then another kind of sneaky loser, I think, is Luka, who's just, the Mavs can't seem to put the team around him because, Drew Holiday would be a great fit with Luka. Plays defense, he can handle the ball, he still spots up well. And I don't think I think Drew Holiday is a lot better fit with Luka than Kyrie. Kyrie does the same things that Luka does, just not as well. And he's more He's much more comfortable with the ball in his hands than without, and he's not good on defense. Well, Drew Holiday, you go ask the players, any of the player surveys, who's the most underrated, who's the best guard defender. Drew Holiday is so highly regarded amongst the players in the NBA as a defense player. They say he's the hardest guy to score on. Most of the guards say that he's like their least favorite one to have guard. He's just really, really an elite level player on that end. And Luka is not. He's just flatly not. It's like, it's all right. It's not everyone's going to be a defensive superstar. It's like not everyone's a two-way guy. Dirk Nowitzki was never really a two-way guy. Won a championship in 2011. Steph Curry, not really a two-way guy. He's won 4 championships. It's fine. You just have to build your team accordingly if you have a superstar like that. And I think Drew Holiday could have covered up some of those deficiencies on that end. And now there's, it's just how many teams are better in the West than the Mavs? At least the Suns and Denver, probably the Lakers, probably Golden State. We like the Thunder. And you talked about the Portland having a plan. The Thunder were the team that I brought up, and being a Thunder fan when we were bad for a couple of years. I didn't really mind it because it's like, oh, we have 1,000 draft picks over the next 6 years. We have Shea, who's a budding superstar. We're going to go get Giddey. We have drafting Chet, who could be a star. And we still have a lot of draft capital. It's like, okay, we're going to be bad for a couple of years, but we have a plan to go be in contention pretty quickly, and I think Portland, if you're Portland, you have Scoot Henderson, Shaedon Sharp's a nice piece. You're probably going to trade Drew Holiday for more capital, maybe even another front court guy or at least a wing, where I think they have a plan. I think they're going to be bad for a couple of years, and then they're going to, Scoot Henderson is the kind of guy that maybe can turn that franchise around and get them where the Thunder are this year in a couple of years, which is maybe going to be the 6 or maybe even the 5 seed in the playoffs, have a competitive first round series and get beat by a team that's a little better, but that's all right. Maybe they can win it, so yeah, sneaky loser Luka in the, and just, yeah, big
the
news.
whole of the Eastern Conference is
Eastern Conference, big loser. Yeah, big loser.
All right, well, Tate, I'm glad we took this little diversion into NBA territory, and we'll come back to it for our, 20 fans that actually listen for NBA takes. It'll
Right.
come back whenever the season gets going,
Right.
and especially in the postseason.
Yeah.
But until that happens, we have the more important, I would say, for the majority of Southerners and Americans, the NFL, and I'm going to touch on the NCAA football just for my father-in-law, Mark Fitzhenry. Clemson handed Syracuse their first loss, which is good, but Clemson is also still bad. They're 3-2 now, and University of South Carolina, those fighting Gamecocks, got demolished by Tennessee. So football in South Carolina is still pretty depressing, but there
Yeah.
was one little bright spot there. But moving on to the NFL, we have seen 3 weeks of games now. We're going into our 4th week. The Falcons are not doing much last time I checked.
Where it's 20-7 right now. Jacksonville just got stopped on a 3rd and 5, it looks like. But it's been a little bit of a boring game. Calvin Ridley had a touchdown on like the second, like really early in the game, really early
Yeah,
in the first ride. And since then, there hadn't been a ton going on. Desmond Ritter looks like he's going to get benched pretty soon.
yeah, and that's what a sad game to send over to the fans in London. But we have seen only a few teams protect their undefeated season so far, but we've seen a few teams go completely defeated in the season so far. So out of the remaining 0-3 teams, who might possibly, in any sort of circumstance, magic their way into the playoffs?
So I think we have the same answer here, and it's because it's the correct answer, and it's the Minnesota Vikings. for a couple reasons. First of all, they're a playoff team last year, and now neither me nor Alex were particularly high on them going into the year. If you'll remember, I actually had them finishing last in that division because I thought they would regress back to the mean, which we have seen so far as losing close games. However, they are in the NFC, and there will be a wild card team that only wins 9, maybe 10 games. We may see 2 wild card teams in the NFC with 10 wins. So can the Vikings find a way to go 10-4 down the stretch or 9-5? I don't really think so, but they could because Kirk Cousins has had turnovers, but is actually playing really well and is moving the football really, really well. He's one of the leaders in passing yards per game right now. And if they can avoid some of the crucial turnovers, maybe they lose some games and they get off prime time as much, which, as we know, Kirk Cousins plays a little better at noon on local television than at Sunday night on national television. If they can continue to have some games where there's less eyes on them, I think that bodes well for them, where they kind of take the pressure off and maybe can kind of get the no one believes in us attitude, play with the chip on their shoulder, but also kind of play more with house money, where I think they could string together some wins. They, if you look at their games, have not been blown out where they are close in these games. It's just been some execution down the stretch. And then lastly, when you have someone like Justin Jefferson, they are at risk, or not at risk. They're always a threat to do something historically great over a stretch of a few games. So can Justin Jefferson, catch a Hail Mary and you win a game that you should lose? Yeah, probably, well, maybe at least, can he have a stretch where he has 1,000 receiving yards over 5 games? Absolutely, something like that's on the board for him, where he is one of these guys that can really impact the game from a winning standpoint that's not a quarterback. Maybe as much as anybody in the league can he do that. So when you have someone who's so elite, and when you're playing close games anyway, I think they could string together some wins. I'm not sure that they can string together some wins, but if you look at the other 0-3 teams, I don't really think there is a lot of good options as far as the 0-3s go. My second choice, and you can talk more on the Vikings here a sec, the Panthers, for a lot of the same reasons I just mentioned, I think Mike could do it. They would have to have Bryce Young come back, stay healthy for the rest of the season, and start playing really well. But the problem is they don't really have anyone for him to throw the ball to. They do have a division that seems vulnerable. The Falcons are going to get beat today, go to 2-2. The Saints, without Derek Carr, Jameis Winston can throw 4 pick sixes in 3 weeks, and you go 0-3 if you're the Saints. And then the Bucks, we both like, but they're not world beaters. They're vulnerable. They're at risk to lose a couple games in a row, maybe. So that would be my one main one would be the Vikings. The second, if I had to pick another one, would be the Panthers.
So just as a reminder to everybody, the completely defeated teams are
completely defeated teams.
I wanted to
I like that expression.
I wanted to find a way to just demoralize teams.
That's so depressing sounding.
Opposite of undefeated. So the completely defeated teams are the Broncos, the Bears, the Vikings, and the Panthers. And I think that the Bears being winless is very likely that they could go winless this entire season, just from how they're playing, how they're being coached, how Justin Fields looks like he's regressed hugely.
They haven't really been competitive in any of their games so far.
No.
And that's really discouraging. Well, it's discouraging in a way if you're the Bears fans. It's kind of not discouraging in the sense that, okay, if we go get Caleb Williams, Marvin Harrison Jr. with the Carolina pick, we go trade Justin Fields. Maybe, I don't know that you could get a first-round pick for him, but you might. He's got enough upside. You really might be able to get a first-round pick. You probably at least get a second. And you go bring in an offense coach. I think there would be reason for optimism moving forward if you're the Bears, even though Justin Fields is a guy I'm high on. I've always liked. He's looked bad. I'm not. There's no way around it. He can't play good this season, but I still believe he's got upside. I believe if you go put him with a Brian Daboll type coach, he could improve and maybe access some of that potential. But yeah, the Bears have been just terrible. They play the Broncos and for the day in a battle of let's not win so we can draft a quarterback, in my opinion. But I think the Broncos probably win that game today.
Yeah, so that with the Bears and the Vikings both being the
Same
undefeated
division. Yeah, same division. Wow.
same division with both of them being in the same division and still being winless, you have to pick one of those two essentially. Because the other teams, like if you're looking at the AFC West and you're the Denver Broncos, you're screwed.
We're
Like
screwed.
point
Yeah,
blank, if you didn't
screwed.
get the easy wins at this point in the season,
They
you're
haven't
not.
played the Chiefs or the Chargers yet.
Yeah,
And
and
they're not as good as either of those two teams. That's for sure.
so
That's like 1-3 or 0-4 right there.
So with that, I would have to take the Vikings if somebody put a gun to my head, but I still don't like their odds because if you look at the Vikings schedule, granted, they could if they theoretically they have not played a single person in their division yet. So theoretically, they could beat the Bears. That's their first in division game. It's coming off of.
They go 2-0 against the Bears. It's like that could be 2 wins. That's 2-3 right there.
But what we're looking at is in 3 weeks, they play the Bears, and it's right after they play the Chiefs. And then their next in division game, which we saw, which is versus the Packers, we saw the Packers get smoked by the Lions. Like
Weird
it
game.
was, it was
Weird
bad
game.
for the Packers. At one point, they had, I think it was like late in the third quarter, they had a total of 1 yard on offense. So that's hard to do. But right before they play the Packers, they have to play the 49ers. So you're looking at maybe they beat the Panthers this week, lose to the Chiefs, beat the Bears, maybe, lose to the 49ers, compete against the Packers.
Well, they would probably have to steal one of the games against the Chiefs or the Niners, right? If they're realistically going to have a shot at making the playoffs, they probably got to go steal one of those games, and they'll
And
be big underdogs in both of them. They probably have to find a way to win one of them.
there, there's no
You don't
possible.
you don't think so? Yeah, I wouldn't think so, but
Their defense, the reason they've lost this year is not their offense, actually. Their defense has been terrible.
the offense
And,
ball, yeah,
and you have, it's kind of pick your poison, right? Like, would you rather have an offense that is two guys destroying you for 60 minutes? Or would you rather have an offense that's a quarterback who's game managing but has a million weapons destroying you for 60 minutes?
right.
So I think the Vikings are screwed. And that leads us to our next question.
Right. Well,
It,
kind of funny answer. To summarize that segment, what 0-3 teams can make the playoffs? None of them. Let's go to the next segment.
so following that segment, and I'll take this one first. Who needs to move on to the next new era? And I think it has to be the Vikings. The Bears could do it with the amount of picks that they're going to end up having. Um, you know, the Panthers are screwed, and let's just keep it down in these winless teams because they're the ones that are obvious that they have to move on.
Right.
Um, the Panthers just drafted their number one quarterback, but whoops, we forgot to give him anything to throw to or any kind of a run game to help him out. You got the Broncos who are tied at the hip to Russell Wilson, and that is like it might be the worst worst management decision we've seen in NFL history, probably,
They're
because he
competing
is.
right with the Browns with Sean. It's like Russ and Deshaun really trying to figure out who the worst contract is.
Deshaun had one good game last week, and now he's hurt. So like, kind of rude. Yeah, it's looking bad. So you got to stick with the Vikings. At a certain point, you don't say we're tanking, but you purposefully don't give Kirk Cousins another contract, and you just kind of hope that your defense plays horribly enough to lose you enough games to go get a high draft pick, get a new quarterback. He's going to have weapons. I don't love Hawkinson, but it's a decent tight end, and as I always say, tight ends are the safety valves for any kind of quarterback. If you want your quarterback to succeed, you get him a line and you get him a tight end, because there's going to be enough wide receivers who can at least speed down the field and keep people honest. But the tight ends are going to add depth to that blocking for a run game. There's enough, as the NFL likes to remind us, there's enough good quality running backs that you don't need to spend a ton of money to get one. And just having something around a good rookie quarterback and stable head coaching
Right.
and a vulnerable, division, right? I think that if I were getting drafted, I would want to go to the Vikings for all of the upside that they as a team have.
Sure.
Uh, so that would be my pick for move on.
To that point, if you're they're not going to get Caleb Williams probably, but if you're Shador Sanders or Drake May, what a dream it would be to come in and Justin Jefferson is your receiver. You know what I mean? Where it's like, and if you're Justin Jefferson, you get someone who can throw the ball down the field and make some plays. It's like it may take a little bit of a learning period to get them on the same page as far as chemistry goes in game. But like, I'd be thrilled if I was Justin Jefferson and if I was one of the quarterbacks that got drafted. Now, I have a different answer, and we were going to touch on this game a little bit, I think, anyway. But the team that I think needs to move on and change eras, at least from a quarterback standpoint, is actually the Patriots. And I know Mac Jones was leading the league in completions, but that's not always a good sign, right? It's like that means you're not being efficient with the ball. That probably means you're down a lot in games. It means the running game's not going well. So I think the Patriots really need to try, and they are not usually going to be bad enough to get a high draft pick, but this would be the year where they might can get a pick in that top 10, top 15 kind of level. And there's 5 or 6 franchise quarterbacks coming this year. Or you could even sit him maybe behind Mac for a year if you wanted to, or you just move on. Like, depends on who it is. But Bo Nix, I think, would be a good option for him. Michael Penix in Washington, I think, be a good option for him. Shador Sanders, if he decides to come out, I think would be a good option for him. I think they'd have an opportunity to get one of those quarterbacks. And that's why we were going to talk about, I think, a little bit, who would a loss be worse for today in the Cowboys-Patriots game? My answer was the Cowboys, and one of the reasons I said that is because if I'm the Patriots, I almost kind of want to lose. And the only downside would be if Robert Kraft, the owner, gets so fed up with losing that Bill Belichick loses his job. I think that could be a negative, but it may be time to kind of let him go find something else too. I think it'd be cool if he won the all-time win record as a Patriot, just because that's where obviously he's made his name, but yeah, if they could go get Shador Sanders, I think Bill O'Brien's a pretty good, okay offensive coordinator, and they would have maybe an opportunity to get a guy who could change the franchise around, give that offense a little more of a threatening, big play kind of opportunity, explosive play guy, and I think that would be the team that to me needs to move on, at least from a quarterback standpoint, because we've seen Mac Jones for 3 years now. There's just nothing impressive. And what you were hoping with him is he could come in and manage a game and not lose the game for you. I'm sure that's why the Patriots drafted him. The problem with that is you have to have playmakers enough on offense to go get you some big plays anyway, which they do not have. And Mac Jones isn't even that good of a game manager because he turns the ball over. So for those two reasons, their kind of idea of we're going to run the ball, play good defense, and just not have the quarterback lose us games has been really a failure with Mac Jones because they don't have the pieces around him to have that style of quarterback and to take that approach, right? So that's why, like I said, to me, that's who needs to move on today.
Yeah, I would hearken back to what the plan moving on from Tom Brady was originally,
Right.
which is find an intelligent player, maybe a little bit younger with a little bit of mobility,
Right.
and extend plays with his legs, and
Right.
but still smart decisions.
Right. And the other thing about Mac Jones, he doesn't really fit their culture from a personality standpoint. Bill hated it when he went and got an outside opinion from the team doctors, when he was dealing with an injury last year. He's kind of a dirty player and doesn't totally take accountability all the time, which is just very not Bill Belichick, very not New England, where I think there's some guys in college, Shador even, who's actually been working quite a bit with Tom Brady. So that may be a little bit of some foreshadowing, as far as if he comes out with the Patriots take him, they might, and I know Tom Brady really likes him. And I think from a personality standpoint, he'd be a better fit too. Sometimes it's hard to tell, but like I said, to me, that's definitely who needs to move on today or move on to the next era, if you will.
Oh yeah, and I think that like you said, Mac Jones is just a dirty player, and it's rare that we
Really
hear
honest. Yeah.
quarterbacks get called dirty players. But whenever let's call it what it is, he's going after literally the balls of all his defenders, either kicking, tapping, like running his head into it's
And
just
when you saw him do that to Sauce Gardner, what's really concerning about his last incident, if you will, his team did not they didn't come to back him up at all. So his team knows what's going on. They do not approve, and you can tell by their actions that they don't approve. And when someone like that is in the locker room where you can't have a quarterback that the team doesn't have their back. That means he's not a locker room guy. He's not beloved in that locker room like a quarterback really should be. Even CJ Stroud, like I think the Houston Texans have rallied around CJ Stroud. I think he looks like he should have been the first pick in that draft, which I actually said a while ago. And you know, I think you get these guys who are beloved. Can you imagine Patrick Mahomes getting in a tough, if you will, and the whole team not clearing the bench to, it's like, it doesn't matter if it was Mahomes' fault right now. Like if Mahomes did a dirty play today, because it would be such an outlier event, they're not going to let the other team touch Patrick Mahomes, and the Patriots are kind of used to it. They've seen it before. Then, like I said, obviously don't condone that kind of behavior. The players where they didn't come to his back. I thought that was really concerning if you're a Patriots fan.
oh yeah. I think but I guess to the point, yeah, definitely a loss for the Cowboys, especially coming off a loss from the Cardinals last week, who I've been saying is trying to go 0-17, but they whoopsied their way into a win by showing that they're still competitive as what I'm going to assume is a 1-16 team this
Yeah,
year.
probably.
They heard Caleb talking mess about not wanting to, like, just staying in. So I think that yeah, if you're the Cowboys and you lose this game, it's going to fall solely on the shoulders of Dak Prescott, and that's a bad spot to be in.
Yeah.
Uh,
Okay. So just a couple things about the Cowboys. If you can't, just you just can't lose 2 games in a row to the Cardinals and the Patriots, both of whom they will be a touchdown favorite over, both of whom we would consider bad teams. And I think it would feel like the same old Cowboys. It would totally undo all the expectations and all the work they did over the first 2 weeks if they lose back-to-back games to pretty below average teams at best, right? The Cardinals, obviously, we thought were going to be the worst team in the league. The Bears are trying their damnedest to make sure that they're the worst team in the league, it looks like. But, you know, and, from a Cowboy standpoint, if you were a Trayvon Diggs injury away from basically not being a very good defense, because they did not look good against the Cardinals. And if they lose to the Patriots today, I assume it will be because Mac Jones has at least a pretty good game. Or if you're one injury away, one injury away besides Micah Parsons, who's the total cog in that defense, you weren't as good on defense as we thought. You weren't as deep as we thought. And you probably are moving on from Dak pretty soon. And that would, if they lose today, end up, missing the playoffs or losing in the first round like they tend to do, I think Dak's last year is probably coming up next season, and we'd be looking at a quarterback even this year in the draft or next year, or seeing if, I know they went and traded for Trey Lance. Maybe they think he's got the upside. Maybe they can develop him, and, maybe he's the guy that they move on from Dak to. But it would be really devastating if you're a Cowboy fan to lose this game to the Patriots today. It would just be a disaster to lose this one.
Oh yeah, you're definitely kicking the tires on
Right.
some quarterback coming up.
Absolutely.
But with that, I want to ask, who is a loss more important to in this? This might end up being our final segment because we're about to watch some football. Titans versus Bengals. Bengals are at the bottom of the AFC North, despite having like some of the favorite Vegas odds to make it to the AFC Championship.
Right.
But we
this is kind of funny, okay? Because just to let everyone behind the curtain a little bit, me and Alex often will improvise our last question, and we keep it very short. I was about to ask you who needs a win the most today, and my answer was the Bengals. Because the Bengals, you can't go to 1-3. The Titans are a very beatable team. So, one word answer: who needs to win the most today? The Cincinnati Bengals. Their division's really, really good, and they can't go to 1-3. And that's my final answer. Yeah, Bengals got to go and get a win today.
totally agree. I don't know. Spirit is moving me. I went to church this morning, and the spirit's moving me today. Mike Vrabel got embarrassed last week.
Yeah.
He's very likely on a war path.
I think the Bengals going to beat them. I think the Bengals beat them. I think they keep it going. I think, yeah, I think they do. But
anyway. If I $100, I'd be taking the Titans at this point. Like, I think,
well,
it's moving in a different direction, and I don't like where the Bengals are moving. They kind of righted the ship last week, but we'll see what happens.
Alex, one word: who wins today, the Dolphins or the Bills?
Dolphins. That's a stupid question.
Well, there you have it, everybody. So the Dolphins are going to win today, according to Alex. And we want to thank you all for listening to this episode 5 of Tate's Takes. We will be back again before these games next week with some recap and some further analysis. If there's an NBA topic that we have to talk about, we will. If not, we'll probably go NFL heavy for next week. So thank you all so much, and we will see you next time.